Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials.
So Engagers, today is an exciting day. We have a very different episode. We still don't completely know what's going to come up, but we will rise up to the task. So, Jon and Tracy, are you prepared to engage?
I'm ready to pass my sanity check and fight Cthulhu.
Jon.
Yeah, I've got 18s in all of my stats, so I'm good.
Let's get the ball rolling today.
Let's go.
So the first question we ask, before we get started, Engagers, I just wanted to let you in into something. Both Jon and Cassie, they have a podcast called Game Level Learn, which we'll probably get into a bit during the interview. And the reason why we have today a couple of guests is mainly because they do their podcast together. We're testing this out, see how it goes, and I think we're going to love it because we have some fantastic guests today who have been working on podcasts and that kind of stuff together for quite a while already, and they've been working on games and gamification as well. So that's this small sort of disclaimer, so to speak, for this episode, and we'll get into the first question, Jon and Tracy, and get started as however you want to take this angle from.
I always let Tracy go first.
Oh, beautiful! All a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy's not convinced.
I always it's the equivalent of asking someone to go in front of you in the party order.
Yeah.
So this way, whatever Tracy says, it's like, well, I didn't think that was
Right, I'm your meat shield.
Yeah, you're my meat shield. Exactly.
So the first thing that we would like to know, Tracy and Jon, is what does a regular day with you guys look like, if there's such a thing?
Yeah, so it's this summertime right now. So I'm a teacher, I'm a full-time teacher. So I'm on my summer vacation, but I'm actually teaching at the University of Pittsburgh for something called Governor's School. So it's a 4-week intensive program for high school students. So I'm there every day from about 9:30 until 4:30, working with high school students on global studies. So we've just finished our unit on commodity chains and capitalism. And and the kids are starting. We're working on environment right now, and we'll be doing global health and migration next week. So even though it's the summer, I've been quite busy planning and working with kids. And next week, we're playing Pandemic for global health, for the global health unit. Yeah.
Nice.
For those of you who don't know, Pandemic is a board game.
Yay!
Yeah. It's a great board game. One of the most pure cooperative board games that exists in the market. Yeah.
So before we move on, I just realized I didn't read your intros, and the first intro, of course, is that of Tracy, who is a veteran educator, a longtime gamer. She's enthusiastically exploring and bringing gamification to her classroom learning communities, like her chemistry class, where the students have to solve puzzles and find the secret code to escape the classroom. So an escape room is that. What I'm gathering. And she's also a master's educated chemist, about to start her 15th year of teaching. She's the organizer for the Pittsburgh chapter of the National Coalition of Gamers and hosts many gaming events every month, such as MEEPLE. When she's not gaming, she's exploring the world, planning another trip, or diving into new games and new experiences. How about a content-driven escape room in your class? Yes, please. That's Tracy. And not to do it the other way around, but this time I'm going to talk about Jon before he talks about himself. Jon Cassie is the director of curriculum at innovation at TVT Community Day School in Orange County, California. He's a podcaster, a gamer, and a teacher, and also the author of Level Up Your Classroom, a practical guide to game-based learning and the gamified classroom, published in 2016 by ASCD. Is there anything that you guys would like to add before getting into Jon's typical day?
Nah, that pretty much covers it for me.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So, Jon, what does a regular day with Jonathan Cassie look like?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy most days. During the work year, because my school is a transitional kindergarten through grade 12 program, I'm going to be working with teachers, working with kids, teaching, trying to develop curriculum, trying to help faculty use new spaces like our maker spaces and engineering labs and film studios, trying to help bring up teachers' practices across the board so that these spaces that my school has built, we're more effective at using. And, because education technology and information technology and maker spaces and design labs and things like that are all kind of new on the American scene, it's a lot of work, right? It's exciting work. It's exciting work, but it's a lot of work. So that's what a sort of a typical workday might look like. Gaming wise, I'm into everything. I'm into board games, card games, role playing games, video games. You name it. What have I been playing? Recently I've been playing a lot of games that involve like manipulating dice. Okay, so games like Sagrada, which is a game about making beautiful stained glass windows from vividly colored dice, and a game called Role Player, where you basically are designing a role-playing character from scratch by doing dice drafting. Super fun.
Sounds very interesting.
And a game master, role-playing game-wise, tabletop games, a game master a game called Numenera, which Tracy's done some Numenera with me as well. But Numenera is basically set in a very, very distant future where technology is weird, and the technology biological interfaces are common and that kind of thing. So it's in a kind of genre called the Dying Earth, or kind of the new weird. That's fun. So on any given day, that's what'll happen. Today I've got a bunch of people coming over to to the house, and we're going to play all manner of games. Tracy, we're going to play Decrypto.
Yay! Right? We played it last week at MEEPLE.
Yeah.
God,
that game is fun. Hard.
Yeah. Our game was not as long as the game that we played together.
Praise the Lord. Good grief.
Yeah. We're too smart. What can I say?
Right. That's right. Yeah. Decrypto, sort of like a password kind of game where you're trying to get you're trying to decipher word clues given by a member of your team before the other team, correctly intercepts it. So super fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like you have a lot of experience with all of these games, and you've been doing these things for quite a while. And I'm sure that there's many things that we could get into, and we will further on in the interview. But right now, I want to focus on something completely different, because it's not always been flowers and rainbows. There's certainly been harder times where some of the things you've tried have not worked as you expected. And that's what I want to get into right now. Is there any story that you guys can tell, whether collectively or individually, where you would say this was like a big fail or a first attempt in learning that actually later led me to a success in something that I implemented in my class, or a big learning that led me later to doing something different? Is there a story around those kind of things that you could talk about?
I like to think that I fail regularly. I would say that most of the time that I've tried things in class, they've not done super well the first time I've done them, because obviously everything makes sense in my head, but I'm working with a population that doesn't understand games necessarily the way that I do. So things that seem obvious to me aren't always obvious to the teenagers that I'm teaching. So I've definitely done some things, like designed escape rooms for my chemistry class where, they've been a bit too hard, and, they're meant to take like a half an hour for the kids to escape. But, kids are staying into lunchtime because they're like, we have to solve this puzzle.
Right,
and that wasn't the intent. I'm happy that they're excited, but that was never my intention, to sort of have them stick around for an extra 30 minutes to finish. So I think almost everything I've done has been definitely a first draft. Nothing has failed super spectacularly yet, where like it totally didn't work at all. But most of the time, the first run through is nerve-wracking and, obviously not perfect.
Tracy, can we get a bit deeper into the story of that escape room, for example, that you mentioned that it was a bit or a lot harder than you initially expected for the kids?
So I consider them sort of like mini escape rooms. So I've done 2. And when I teach them about significant figures, and recording measurements, which is super boring for teenagers. I think it's super interesting that that's how scientists communicate precision to each other, but the kids are like, oh my God. So I tried to make an escape room where they had to like go around the room and measure like the volume of liquids in different types of glassware, measure the length of note cards. But then I also like put letters on everything that spelled the name of our school, Sewickley. But I turned the W upside down so it looked like an M. And they spent way more time trying to figure out the order of things than actually recording the measurements. So like it ended up being fun, but they spent more time on like a stupid, silly thing than on what I actually wanted them to be learning, which was how to record measurements and write them down appropriately.
So maybe that side quest took over a bit of your class.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it ended up being great because finally some kid was like, we need to write all these letters on the board. And as soon as that kid wrote them on the board, another kid was like, oh my gosh, it spells Sewickley.
Right.
Tracy, is there something that you could say that after you did that escape room, that maybe the next escape room that you would do, that you would create from scratch, you would do something differently? Is there something that you like a key takeaway that you would say from that experience?
I think simpler sometimes can be better, especially depending on the level of kid that you're working with. You know, I think I designed an escape room for maybe AP chemistry kids that were, you know, older kids who've had chemistry before. And my target audience was younger kids who have been in chemistry for the first time. And I think simple, more straightforward instructions would have been more appropriate for them.
So considering the audience, the students that you had was something that maybe would have helped you in that, had you, like, hindsight is 20/20 as usual, but.
Yeah. And considering their level of risk taking and not having explicit, some kids have a really hard time not having explicit instructions. Older kids are usually okay with that, like, oh, we'll figure it out, it's fun. But younger kids can become very frustrated if they haven't practiced those skills. So I think that was sort of a beginning of the year activity, and I think for that I should have had pretty clear instructions for them. And the more they practice the skills, I think by the end of the year I could sort of, you know, just put stuff around the room and say, well, you got to get out today. Good luck. But they weren't ready for that yet.
That sounds like a very exciting activity, and I'm sure that now you're able to use that many more times. Once you created it once, you can use it again.
Right. Yes. So now I can use it every year. Yeah.
That's something that I always like to highlight, and it's that, of course, as usual, as when creating a new subject, when creating a new line for teaching, it's going to be hard the first time. But the second time, it's always going to it can only get easier.
Right. That's
right. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So the experimentation phase is fundamental. John, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, no, the preparation to do any of this kind of gamified work it's just extraordinarily hard to plan, right? Yeah. And because it inevitably goes wrong the moment a student starts to interact with it, you know, you've got not only all the planning you've done, but all the planning you have to redo, you know, to make sure that the thing actually succeeds. But I think you've hit on a huge point that once it exists, then it's pretty easy to reduplicate, you know, to get a whole new set of skills or to do it again next year or what have you.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah.
And John, do you have a story? It could be entirely different about something similar that happened to you, that maybe you said, oh, this completely flopped, and then you realize something and you say, here's the thing that I had to change and then brought it back to the class.
Maybe not so much a like disaster, but I didn't realize this was a thing. The very first gamified experience that I designed for students was I gamified a whole class on contemporary American history. Okay, and in order to pass the class, you needed to learn sort of history content, and you needed to do historical things. Okay, you know what do historians do? They read archives and they interview people and they look at visual art and whatever. Okay, so they have to, you know, historians read and write and critique and all this kind of stuff, right? So I designed an experience that had a lot of that knowledge stuff and a lot of that historian doing stuff, right? what I didn't know, and I also had, like in most massively multiplayer online role-playing games, a system of achievements that would be, be the first person to gather research in a foreign language, or be the first person to get a professor from a local university to help you, or whatever, right?
Okay.
What I didn't anticipate was how motivating the achievement scheme was. Okay. That the players, the learners, were perfectly interested in doing the history content, or writing short papers, or a series of tweets that spoke to whatever they had recently read, or putting together, curating photo essays or whatever. But the moment it became clear that there were ways to earn these public achievements and get that sort of recognition, there was no additional reward. You got nothing for it other than, I acknowledged that you got that achievement. That was the most motivating thing ever. And so in subsequent designs, I've sort of put the achievement system, sort of most forward.
Yeah, and more intentionally, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the design is much more thoughtful than it was before, because really I spent a lot of time on developing kind of leveling through content. What does it mean to study women in America from 1970 to 2010? All right, well, it's got this, and then it's got this, and this, and this, and this, and this. So I was really thoughtful about that, and the achievement system was sort of like, that'll be fun.
We'll give him something else.
Yeah, exactly. And it turned out to be the most important thing of all. So, I mean, of course, the other thing is exactly what Tracy said, that every single gamified experience I've designed, I've thought this is going to take an hour, and it takes 2.
Yeah, that happens. Having that flexibility, as usual when experimenting, is fundamental. And I was listening to you, and I realized that in Tracy's experience, she had a side quest that was taking over the experience, and that maybe had to be slightly left out or changed. Mm-hmm. And in your case, it was all the contrary. You had something that was kind of a side hustle that you had for your game, which actually came to the forefront of what you were doing. Right. So that's a fun thing that I'm sure you didn't plan beforehand, but it was pretty interesting to get into those things.
Right. The first time a student earned a class first achievement,
okay,
you are the very first person in class to do X, and I made like a public announcement in class. and I sent it out on our learning management system. The students were like, "What just happened?" I said, "This is what happens when you get an achievement." They were like, "What?
I didn't know.
I have to have one." It was crazy, But Tracy and I both play different MMOs, but I've got to tell you,
global announcements are the worst.
Oh, they're the worst.
Congratulations to the guild, blah, 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 for reaching level 100. Here I am at 52.
Yeah, right. But when you get that little tile plate, at least in World of Warcraft, the game I play, when you get an achievement, you get this kind of visual effect that's like, ba-ba, and a little visual plate will show up that says, you get 10 points for earning this dumb achievement, or this really cool achievement, right? Super motivating, right? And, look, the critique of gamification is it's too gimmicky. But the simple fact is, if you use the gimmickiness to your advantage and you stay focused on your learning objectives, who cares if it's gimmicky?
Yeah, I have to agree. To definitely agree. And that's something that I, when we give workshops at the university, that we talk about these things is to always remember what is your learning objective. And as long as you're still focused on your learning objectives, and that everything that comes in is to support it, to get people excited about the learning objective, to get people engaged into whatever you're designing, it's perfect. It's fine. I mean, and you can be super gimmicky. You can have like a lot of fun and have characters and comics, or you can have more like psychological strategies and things, and they can both work. It depends on your audience. It depends on what you want to do. How do you want them to see you? How do you want to make them feel? And there's many things that can be done. And as you say, what does it matter if I am a bit gimmicky or a lot gimmicky? If it achieves the things, the students are engaged and they learn a lot. So
correct, which is all that I ultimately care about. Unless I'm teaching a game design class, I'm using the method because I think it's the best way to help students learn something.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And Jon Cassie and
yes.
Tracy Wazenegger. I hope I got that last name right.
Yep.
You got them both right. Good for you, man.
There you go. Badge for me. So the next thing that I would like to get from you guys is the opposite story. Something that you even not, if not in the first round, the second round, the third round, whatever it took, but a story where you did something that you used in your classes and it was a massive success. Something that you say, I would be proud of this. I would put this on my proud wall. This is something that I would show off about. Can you give us a story of something that you did in your classes that took you guys to that level?
I think I'm halfway through one now. I'm proud of the little escape room things that I've done. The kids really like them. You know, that the example that I gave before about the failure, I've pretty much worked it out, so it's working now. And I have another little one that I do with balancing equations that works just wonderfully. But I'm trying to gamify my lab experiments for AP chemistry to give students more student choice and to give them a bit more independence in completing their experiments. And last year I did sort of like a choose your own adventure where they could pick which labs they wanted to do when. So typically in a high school chemistry classroom, every kid is working on the same experiment at the same time. So I had, 5 different experiments running on any given lab day. And it worked really well. I think having the choice to do the lab they wanted to do, and then I set goals for them. You have to have earned this many points by this date. It worked pretty well. Kids came in during lunch if they were a little slower or missed a lab day. And once I had prepped all of the labs at the beginning of the year, it was a lot less prep work for me. But I don't think it's quite there yet. And while we recorded season 3, episode 1, I thought of some new ideas to add into it where kids will have to earn pieces of lab equipment by passing quizzes or things like that, so that I know that they've done the pre-lab work that they need to do, that they have all the skills they need to complete the lab appropriately. So I'm hoping that this time next year, that's going to be my portfolio piece for gamification.
The front page.
the big one. Yeah. But I think it's still a work in progress for me.
I love the choice aspect of gamification. Whenever you can give choice to learners, to students, it can be a beautiful thing. And I love what you're doing precisely because it incorporates choice and lets them say, well, this is the way I want to do it, and they gain ownership. They feel it's their thing, and that my guess is that that's why they go in even during lunch, because they say, well, this is the way I chose, so I better keep up.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
This is my game. This is my lab, and that's why I want to do it. So So you're flipping the motivation around from you have to do it, and this is the lab that you have to be at, to it's my lab, and I wanna do it right because it's mine. So I love it. I love your story, Tracy. And I'm sure it'll get more and more successful every year.
I hope so.
Yeah, right.
Jon, I'm sure you have many stories about this, but what's one thing as well that you could say, well, this is something I'm loving currently, or that I love that I did in the past and I keep on using it nowadays, or not, that you can give us a story where we can take some key learnings from your experience.
I did a class in 2012 on the U.S. election, where Barack Obama was running for re-election and Mitt Romney was his opponent. And I divided the class into a campaign team for Barack Obama and a campaign team for Mitt Romney. And at various times in class, I would break in with kind of news of the day, and I would give the teams very limited amounts of time to sort of role play what either the administration or the opposition's, kind of take on that would be. And as they made decisions, I would change the Electoral College projection map that I had up in my classroom. So, if the president's team botched something, then I would move a state that had been in the Obama camp over to the Romney camp, And so it was sort of like a role-playing game scenario, right? And I did that throughout the entire class. But I did one particularly long segment that involved North Korean shenanigans, with the North Korean Navy, moving in ways that got the Japanese and the South Koreans anxious, and sort of made each team use their full resources. Someone represented the president or Governor Romney, and then there was the Secretary of State and the ambassador to the UN and Republican figures in Congress and right. So I sometimes shy away from role-playing components because in a large class that can be a little hard to manage, but by being able to divide students into obvious teams and to give the students clear roles, that was super effective. And I've done that a few times, models like that, since then, where I've been able to divide the class into role-playing teams with clear perspectives and clear objectives that they then have to role-play their way through to try to get to. So I think that's where I would land.
That's beautiful. In fact, it reminds me when I did my master's degree, I did an MBA. I had for whatever reason, I took a class on political marketing. During that, I had a phenomenal professor. Her name is Carmen Beatriz Fernandez, and she has a consulting group as well. She's a professor, and she has a consulting group, and she has a simulation that she has absolutely completely on her head. It's nothing written down. There's nothing digital. There's nothing else right now. And she literally took us. It was like calling it something like Politiland or something like that, like the politician's land. So you were supposed to, you were on one of, I think, 4 teams or 3 teams, and there was like another team that was actually the professor. Every once in a while came in and said, these corrupt officials, they've done this and they just like blasted in, gave all these things, and everybody was like, oh God, what do I do now? It was pretty crazy. It was a lot of fun. We started, I mean, of course we were like MBA students, so the setting is a lot different, but there were people making pictures, and we had Twitter, and we had Facebook groups, and we had polls, and I mean, it was a lot of fun. And of course, if they're teaching what happens in an election, which is what she was teaching, and what I'm guessing that you had a lot of that in modern or very recent history as well.
Yep.
You get the people to live the experience, and there's nothing better to learn, in my opinion, than to actually get to live it and to see the things from the inside. And then once you finish it, you sit back and you reflect and say, well, remember these 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 things that happened? Well, the reason is this and that, and that the theory behind that is this and that, and they say like, oh God, of course, this is what happened. And that's something beautiful about this kind of, I like to call them simulations when you do that kind of thing. It's something that can be beautiful. The debriefing side, when it's done right. It's like those aha moments for the students. You see the faces lighting up like, oh, of course, I should have known better. But you didn't, and you shouldn't because you didn't know better.
Right. The students were, particularly when I was in this North Korea thing with them, I kept making them respond faster than they wanted to. They're like, we haven't had enough time to prepare. I'm like, what do you think it's like to be president of the United States? You don't have time. You've got to go out in front of the American people by the evening news cycle, or your opponents will get out there. What is the president doing? What's going on in this country, right? And they were like, that's crazy. I'm like, then do something about it. But for purposes of this exercise, you must respond if you do not have an answer to this question in 7 minutes, then I'm going to assume that you didn't make one, that you said nothing. And then I will ask Team Romney what their response is. Because he's going to be landing. I've got him on an airplane, simulated airplane, right? He's going to land in Phoenix. And when he does, he's going to go down those stairs, and there'll be a microphone. And he will say something. And if you don't get your word out, his word will get out. That's unfair. Yes. Yes. Next time, if you can't handle it, don't be president.
Don't go for re-election.
Yeah, don't run for re-election. Right? That kind of thing. So, the fact that the simulation in some way captured what it's like to be always on was one of the big takeaways for my students.
Yeah, and that's precisely part of the experiment of living what, for example, being a president or a candidate or living the political campaign is like. You're always on. I mean, and especially in these times, where there's social media, where there's all these things. I mean, before they were very public figures and that many things came out, but now it's like there's nothing that doesn't come out. Almost nothing, I guess. But yeah, that's something key right there. Engagers, it's fantastic to have you around. This podcast only makes sense with you, so let's connect on Twitter. That way you can let me know who would you like to have as a guest, what questions you have, what we can help with. Find my Twitter account in professorgame.com/Twitter. I'm always sharing content on gamification, especially for education. And as you probably realized, this episode is still not complete. So if you want to listen to the next episode and complete this conversation with Tracy and Jon, then subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.